My name is Will Hackman. I'm a graduate student at Georgetown's McCourt School of Public Policy and a student leader with the Georgetown Sustainable Oceans Alliance. The mission of the Alliance is to empower millennials to become leaders in preserving the health and sustainability of our oceans. Our organization has been a key partner for the State Department's Our Ocean Conference Youth Summit, which just wrapped up its first day. With me today is Dr. Jonathan Pershing, who serves as a special envoy for climate change at the U.S. Department of State. In this role, Dr. Pershing is the lead U.S. negotiator at the annual United Nations Climate Conference. Dr. Pershing, thank you so much for agreeing to speak with us today.
Pleasure to be here.
As many know, you are an essential part of the Paris Climate Agreement. I'd like to start by asking how you came to care about tackling climate change. Was there a particular experience or turning point that convinced you that this is what you wanted to dedicate your career to?
So I've actually been working on the climate change issue for a long time, a better part of more than 30 years now. One of the things that I'm struck by, so I did my training as a geologist, and one of the things that geologists think about is things that happen over a very long period of time, millions of years. One of the things that I was struck by in the climate change context is how fast we're changing things. Sure, climate's changed historically. We have the periods of the dinosaurs, we have the periods of the dry eras, but those happen over eons. We're doing those same things over a period of years. And the daunting nature of that struck me as something that really was important to work on. Because we could actually live with a changed climate. We're going to have a hard time living through the changing of the climate. And to me, how to slow that down, how to make that work for people, how to think about the interplay of these were really important questions.
Absolutely. I think all of us would agree with that. So all of us at the Youth Summit, as well as the broader State Department Our Ocean Conference, are concerned about meeting the critical challenges climate change poses to the health and sustainability of the ocean. Acidification from carbon pollution threatens shellfish and coral. Warming temperatures are shifting fish migration patterns. This all threatens food security for billions worldwide. Given your extensive experience, can you speak about the connections between climate change and marine health and what is being done to address these crises in the context of the international climate negotiations?
Listen, I think that the climate intersection with oceans is one that's somewhat less well told. It's a story that's hugely important and one that we have to elevate. Let's start from the beginning. About 30% of all greenhouse gas emissions are absorbed by the oceans. If we lose the ocean's ability to absorb it, the atmospheric temperatures will just rise that much more quickly. The second thing is we're seeing a lot of the heat being taken up by the oceans. The system is warming, the oceans are warming, and as a consequence, as you've described, species are migrating, coral reefs are dying out, the oceans are rising. We're seeing real implications as a consequence of climate change for sea level increases, not just a little bit, not an inch or so, but feet, perhaps by the end of the century as much as 6 feet. And if you think about communities, not just on our own coasts, Florida, New York, California, what happens with 6 feet, but you think about whole regions of the world, Southeast Asia, I lose Bangladesh's coast with millions, probably 100 million people just there, or I lose whole countries. That dynamic is playing out. So what do? At the end of the day, it means we have to solve the climate problem. That's the first and foremost thing that we have to deal with. We have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Those come from almost everything. The biggest share, energy production. That includes transportation, that includes industry. Second big share, agriculture and forestry, land use management. These require a pretty fundamental shift in how we do business. It doesn't mean we have to be less well off. We can substitute ways of doing things that are clean and climate friendly with the same benefit. I can have electricity. I run it from a solar panel. I can have an agricultural system. I turn my soil over and store the carbon in the soil and use fertilizer in a different way. I can have my trees. I intercrop. So there are a lot of solutions here that we can work on that don't mean a fundamental change in our values and quality of life, but they just change how we get there.
That's fascinating. So many millennials watching this interview may be motivated to follow in your footsteps and strive to affect change as you have. What advice do you have for young people who wish to be part of finding the solutions to our environmental crises, and what role do you see millennials playing in innovation and creativity and the solutions that you've been describing?
So one of the things that I'm struck by in the climate change problem is how broad it is. There is no sector of our global economy that's not in some fashion affected, which means there's virtually no sector which you as an individual couldn't find a real strong connection in helping solve the problem. So let's break it out a little bit. Supposing you want to be a scientist and your focus is the oceans, and your view is that how do you fix climate from that window? We don't actually know enough about where its damages are. Could you help us better understand that? Supposing you want to be a journalist and the issue really is how to elevate people's understanding. That's an enormously important thing. It informs our societies in a critical way. Supposing what you want to do is you want to do theater. There's actually been a whole effort by the theater community to bring climate impacts and sustainability to community theater around the nation. There's nothing that you couldn't find as some way to elevate it. The question is, can you intersect? Can you engage? And if you do, you will be powerful.
That's an excellent message. Thank you. So last year, the world came together in a historic climate deal known as the Paris Agreement, as you well know, which committed virtually every country to adhere to greenhouse gas emissions reduction plans in order to keep global average temperature increase to no more than 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels by the end of this century. What does this commitment mean for the United States? Can we, along with the global community, achieve our goals, and what happens if we don't?
The answer is we can achieve them, but it will be hard. It'll be really tough. We have to do things in a very, very different way. At the moment, about a third of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States come from energy, about a third come from industry and residential activity, and about a third come from agricultural land use and other greenhouse gases. So let's look at each one briefly. Energy. What can we do on the energy side? We have to reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 80 to 100%. Green energy. Land use. We have to shift our deforestation so we're no longer cutting down our forests, and in fact, we're planting them up. Industry. We have to find ways of doing business and living in houses that are net neutral on their greenhouse gas emissions. All of this is possible. There's a science, there's a technology, there's a social activity, all of which is central to the solution.
So the next big climate conference is coming up this November in Marrakech, Morocco. For millennials who want to be involved but can't attend in person, what can we do from afar to support your efforts and the efforts of the international community in maintaining our goals?
You know, in some ways, and this is a really nice place to think about the problem, not that many people in the world go to these conferences. Even if it's a huge meeting like Paris, 50,000 people went. Out of how many? 5, 6 billion in the world? So at the end of the day, the question is, how do we get the word out? And one of the things that's amazing about the new technologies that we have, particularly among your generation, among this millennial generation, they are much more attuned to how to communicate. They're much better at it. There's this network of intersection and interaction between people that, frankly, when I grew up, we didn't even think about. So if you get a handful of people at these meetings and they're blogging and they're tweeting and they're running out pictures and they're talking about the process, we can extend the reach of that small cohort that was there at an extraordinary level. And the second thing that I would say is that the kind of energy that comes from the youth, the students, people who are investing in intellectual and emotional parts of this problem is essential. You drive this in a way that the somewhat stodgy older generation worries about but doesn't have the energy to deliver on. And if you can sustain that, actually we have a hope of solving the problem. And to me, that's going to be a unique thing that you will bring that will not succeed without your intervention.
Well, Dr. Pershing, you've devoted your career to addressing climate change to the benefit of my generation and those in the future who will face the consequences of our current actions. Thank you for being with us today and for working to ensure a better future for us all.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.